Have you ever had a question about your job or your career, but you didn't ask HR because you weren't sure if it was actually safe to ask? Today, we're going behind the curtain. Hello, all, and welcome back to another mini-sode of Behind the HR Curtain from the Industrially Organized podcast, where we talk about the workplace truths people experience every day and want to scream out loud from frustration. I'm Nicole, your host, and today we're talking about something I know almost every employee has experienced at some point. The person who thinks they know everything. The person who walks into a situation with half the information, zero context, no actual experience, and somehow still has full confidence that they could run the whole show. Today, we're talking about what I call the ignorant ego. And let me be very clear here before someone gets offended too early in the episode. I am not talking about confidence. Confidence is good. Confidence says, I may not know everything yet, but I'm willing to learn. The ignorant ego says, I have no experience in this, but I'm still positive I could do this better than anyone else. And that, my friend, is where workplace camaraderie dies. Let me take you behind the HR curtain. There was a time when I was working as an HR business partner, and our organization was looking for a new VP of HR. Now, for anyone who has never worked in HR, let me just say this. HR is not just paperwork, policy, and telling people no. And I know that is the popular rumor, but HR is strategy. It's operations, it's compliance, it's employee relations, it's investigation, it's leadership coaching, it's compensation, it's workforce planning, it's talent development, risk management, culture work, conflict resolution, it's emotional labor, and it's business partnership. And sometimes it's also explaining for the 900th time why someone cannot just borrow another employee's badge. So, yes, there is a lot happening behind the curtain. So, back to my story here. At the time that I was an HRBP, I loved my job. I was working really hard to make our HR department feel more approachable. I wanted employees to know that we were not just this scary department that appeared when someone was in trouble. I wanted people to feel like HR was a resource. I wanted them to feel comfortable coming to us. So one day, an employee came into my office because I was helping her with her retirement plans. And we were having a normal conversation, nothing dramatic, nothing tense, just a regular employee conversation. And at some point in the conversation, she casually said that she just knew she could do the VP of HR job with no problem. No problem, just like that. Now, this employee had no HR background, no operations background, no real customer service background. Her job for many years had been helping people use an internal program that calculated test answers and final grades or assessments. She helped set up tests in the system and troubleshoot issues. That was her area of expertise. And I want to be respectful here because every job has value. Her work had value. Her job, her knowledge had value. And I'm not minimizing what she did in her job. But when she said she could easily do the VP of HR job, I had a physical reaction, like gut wrenching. Because in that one comment, it felt like she erased the complexity of my entire profession. It felt like she had no respect for how hard and complex HR work really is. She had no idea that the VP level is even more intense than my HRBP level at the time. So she completely devalued even my experience. And I remember sitting there thinking, you do not even understand what I do. And yet you're completely confident that you could run the whole department. And I felt myself shrink. I felt useless for a second. I felt obsolete. And here's the part that makes it even more frustrating. She had no idea the impact of what she had just said. She was not trying to hurt me. She was not trying to insult me directly. She was just speaking from a place of complete ignorance with complete confidence. And that is ignorant ego. And I think that's what makes these moments so hard because sometimes the person is not being intentionally cruel. They're not always trying to disrespect you. They're not always sitting there thinking, let me ruin someone's day with one sentence. Sometimes they just genuinely do not know enough to know that they should just be quiet. And that is a special kind of workplace danger because an ignorant ego can sound harmless in a casual conversation, but it can create real damage. It can make skilled people feel completely dismissed. It can make experienced employees feel invisible. It can create tension between departments. It can make support roles feel extremely undervalued. And it can cause people to underestimate the work that keeps the organization running. And it can destroy trust, even when that was not the intention. Now, I know HR gets this a lot. People think HR is easy because they only see the visible part. They see the meeting invite, they see the policy update, they see all of the forms, like OMG, all of them. They see the onboarding checklist, they see the benefits email, they see the per my last conversation tone in a message and think, oh, I could do that. But they don't see the investigation behind the scenes. They don't see the legal risks being evaluated. They don't see the coaching conversation with the manager who is about to say something wildly inappropriate. They don't see the employee crying in your office. They don't see the policy interpretation. They don't see the documentation required by state or federal law. They don't see the balancing act of supporting employees while protecting the organization. They don't see the emotional control it takes to remain calm when everyone else is escalated. They don't see the confidential things you carry that you can never explain. That is the thing about a lot of jobs. People only see the output. They don't see all the labor behind that output. And when someone has an ignorant ego, they judge the whole job by the little bitty piece that they can see. That's like walking into a restaurant, eating one plate of food and saying, honestly, I could run this entire kitchen. Could you though? Could you handle the inventory, food safety, staffing, scheduling, customer complaints, vendor issues, equipment problems, profit margins, and someone calling out sick 10 minutes before the dinner rush? Could you really? Or did you just enjoy the pasta? There is a difference. And this does not only happen in HR, this happens everywhere. The employee who thinks leadership is easy because they have never had to make a decision that impacts 200 people. The manager who thinks admin work is simple because they never had to keep the whole office functioning while being interrupted every 7 minutes. The executive who thinks frontline employees are replaceable because they have not had to deal with customers face to face in years. The coworker who thinks IT just pushes buttons because they don't understand infrastructure, cybersecurity, systems, or the fact that half the company would collapse if the Wi Fi blinked too long. The person who thinks maintenance is just fixing stuff until the air conditioning goes out, the building floods, or something breaks 5 minutes before a major client visit. The person who looks down on housekeeping until the workspace is not clean, safe, or presentable. The person who's rude to the barista, the server, the receptionist, custodian, assistant, security guard, or call center rep because they think the job is beneath them. And let me say this clearly: every role has invisible complexity. Every role has pressure points. Every role has skills that outsiders do not fully understand. And emotional intelligence means you recognize value even when you do not fully understand the work. Your emotional intelligence should tell you you do not know what you don't know. So be respectful. Now, let's talk about how to handle someone with an ignorant ego, because most of us will work with one at some point. Or you're listening to this and internally damning a very specific name. The first thing is this: do not immediately absorb their ignorance as truth. That was my mistake in that moment. Really, because I just wasn't expecting it. I had a great working relationship with her, so I didn't think that type of comment was going to come from her. She told me all the time how helpful she thought I was, so it just came out of left field. She just made one uninformed comment, but for a second, I let it land as a judgment on my value. And truthfully, I think that's just natural. But her lack of understanding was not evidence that my work lacked value. It was evidence that she lacked context. And that is a very important distinction. Someone can underestimate you and still be completely wrong. Someone can misunderstand your work and have no authority over your worth. Someone can speak with confidence and still have no idea what they're talking about. Do not let somebody's ignorance become your identity. The second thing you should do when dealing with an ignorant ego is to decide whether the comment deserves education, correction, or simply silence. Because not every comment needs a TED talk. Sometimes the best response is exactly what I did in my moment: stay professional, close out the conversation, and move on. Not because the comment was okay, but because not every person is ready for the lesson, and not every situation is worth your energy. However, there are moments where it may be useful to respond with calm curiosity. You could say something like, that role has a lot more complexity than people usually see from the outside. Or, really, well, what part of the role do you feel most prepared for? That question right there will tell you a lot, because sometimes people say they can do a job, but when you ask them what the job actually involves, suddenly the confidence starts looking for an exit. Now say it professionally. Don't say it with the face you are making in your head, because the face in your head might get you called into HR, and then HR has to HR the HR situation. We don't need any of that. The third thing is to protect your own confidence. When someone minimizes your value, remind yourself of the evidence. What have you handled? What problems have you solved? What systems have you improved? What crisis have you helped manage? What knowledge have you built over time? Because ignorant ego thrives in the absence of evidence. Your confidence needs the receipts. It needs evidence, not arrogance. You need to be able to say to yourself, I know what I bring. I know what I've learned. I know what I have carried. And I know what I have contributed. And that does not mean every comment will bounce off of you. Some comments hurt. Mine did. But you do not have to build a home inside that hurt. Okay, feel it. Okay, name it. Learn from it and then keep moving. The fourth thing is to remember that sometimes the person's comment reveals more about them than it does about you. People with ignorant egos often have a very small view of work. They think because something looks simple, it is simple. They confuse exposure with expertise. They confuse opinion with understanding. They confuse confidence with competence. And listen, we have all probably done this in some way. Maybe not with a VP of HR job, but we have all looked at someone else's work and thought, that does not look that hard. And then you try it, and suddenly you are humbled and ask for the expert's help. That's why humility matters, because humility keeps you teachable. Humility reminds you that every job has layers. Humility keeps you from disrespecting people whose work you benefit from but do not fully understand. Now, I want to talk directly to the people who may have an ignorant ego. And I am saying this with love, but I'm also saying it with conviction here. You do not know what you do not know. That is not an insult. That is reality. There are jobs that you could still learn. There are jobs you could grow into. There are roles where your skills may transfer. But that is very different from assuming you can walk in with no background, no training, no context, and immediately do the job with no problem. That is not confidence. That is disrespect dressed up as confidence. And people feel it. They may smile. They may stay quiet. They may close out the conversation politely, but they feel it. They feel when you dismiss the work they have spent years learning. They feel it when you assume their job is easy because they make it look smooth. They feel it when you talk down about roles you have never done. Nobody wants to work with that person. Nobody wants to collaborate with someone who walks into every room acting like they already have all the answers. Nobody wants to teach someone who is too proud to admit they are new to a concept. Nobody wants to be led by someone who does not respect what they do not understand. True emotional intelligence is not just knowing how to talk about your own feelings. It's being aware of your impact on other people. It's knowing when to speak and when to listen. It's being able to say, I have a perspective, but I may not have the full picture. It's recognizing that the person at the front desk may know more about the daily heartbeat of the organization than half the leadership team. It's recognizing that the maintenance crew may understand operational problems before anyone else puts it in a report. It's recognizing that housekeeping contributes to safety, dignity, and professionalism. It's recognizing that the person making your coffee is still a person deserving of respect. They're not just a prop in your busy morning. It's recognizing that job titles do not determine human value. And it's recognizing that expertise often looks easy from the outside because skilled people have learned how to make hard things look manageable. So here is my challenge for all of us. Before you say, I could do that job, pause and ask yourself, do I actually know what that job requires? Do I know what happens behind the scenes? Do I know the pressure, the training, the judgment calls, the emotional labor, the risk, the systems, the relationships, and the consequences involved in that job? Or am I only seeing the final product? There's a big difference between saying, I'd love to learn more about that kind of role, and saying, I could do that with no problem. One is humble and one is ignorant ego. Choose humble. And for the person on the receiving end of the ignorant ego, here's what I want you to remember. Their ignorance is not your performance review. Their lack of respect is not your job description. Their limited understanding is not the limit of your value. Sometimes people will not understand what you carry until they are forced to carry it themselves. And even then, some people will still not get it. You cannot build your confidence around whether someone else understands your work. You have to know your own value deeply enough that one careless comment does not erase everything you know to be true. And yes, I know that that is easier said than done. We are still human. And I had that moment. I had that gut reaction. I had that shrinking feeling. But I also had to remind myself she didn't know. She did not know the work. She did not know the pressure. She did not know the complexity. She did not know what I was trying to build. And her lack of knowing did not mean I needed to stop building. So I kept going. I kept trying to make HR approachable. I kept doing the work. I kept showing up. Because ignorant ego may be loud for a moment, but purpose has to be louder for the long run. So this week, I want you to check yourself. Where might you be carrying an ignorant ego? Where have you minimized a role because you didn't understand it? Where have you assumed something was easy because someone else made it look easy? Where do you need to listen more, to ask better questions, or show more respect? And where have you allowed someone else's ignorant ego make you question your own value? Because both of those sides matter. We need to stop dismissing other people's work. And we need to stop letting uninformed people define our worth. Behind the HR curtain, I can tell you this: every workplace would be better if more people stayed humble, stayed curious, and respected the labor they do not see. So before you lead with ego, I want you to lead with curiosity. Before you minimize, ask. Before you assume, learn. And before you decide someone else's job is easy, remember that you may only be seeing the part that they have mastered. Do better. Stay humble. And please do not bring an ignorant ego into the workplace. Nobody wants to work with it. Mm-mm. I'm Nicole, and that's a wrap for this mini-sode of Behind the HR Curtain. Until next time, my peeps, keep building your success with clarity, structure, and strategy. And remember, the work you do has value, even when someone else does not understand it. I'll see you next time.